Hayo de Gallo. Alright, so this is one of the Kayfabe love letters, and we are looking at Ed Piskor's Red Room today. Now, this this comic is a woozy roller coaster, and there's a lot to learn from this, but it's a trip. I've read all these comics maybe once or twice, and there is a very specific feeling I get from reading these. Now, what Piskor's done here, he has captured the feeling of the mid to late 80s, early 90s, over the top, like these outlaw comics that there's like lots of gore, violence, sex, and duotone and duoshade. Now, there's a handful of different ways to look at all this stuff. Now, the thing that's crazy here, and the thing that I really, it's crazy to say he's put all this effort into his art and looking in a very specific way. But also, if you watch any of the channels on those kayfabe guys, he talks a lot about studying writing and getting to be a better writer. And really, despite the graphic nature of what's going on, these are good stories. So if you're like me, where I'm not a big sex guy, I'm not a big gore guy. Um, there's plenty there for story, and really a little bit of the background that he wanted to do here that was really cool is he wanted to do a duo shade duotone comic, which is again a part of the outlaw scene. All those guys in the 80s and early 90s all use duotone duo shade. Well, it's impossible to get a hold of now, but he did. So I think he got a handful of sheets, and instead of arting up all the sheets, he developed all the sheets at the same time and then scanned them in and then took the real thing and applied it digitally. Now, looking at the art, I kind of feel bad how it came across because it sounded like not a good comment, but when I was talking about the big overview of the kayfabe guys, and I was talking about, what do they bring, and I was talking about his art style, there's a certain tooth and texture that is really like you could just almost feel it with your eyes, and it reminded me, and what I said was a crappy library book, but it was right after the compliment, so it sounded like maybe maybe I'm being self-conscious about it. But here's an example. This is the Jim Woodring Frank book, but it's got do you remember these old library books, with this like gritty, like cross section fabric on them, that these books are like 100 years old that you could get out of some of the libraries. That's what, when I read his comic, it really makes me feel or reminds me of that. Although that book's a new book, you think about these 100-year-old library books, and my eyes can feel that. Now, we look through all this stuff. The things that he does well is there's a roundness and a shape to his characters, to his design, everything that I can really feel. Here's one of his covers. I am always fascinated by hoodie mechanics. So look at that. The inside, that and how that it's laying on the guy's head, that's not there. What a clever panel design. And it's like you feel it, and you see these vertical and cross section lines. That's all the duotone in there. Really amazing work. So you take a look at that and you see the grit I'm talking about, and his characters, you can feel, and yeah. I'm so overwhelmed by even what I'm looking at. Here's a good thing here. See these fingers that are twined into each other. I mean, look at that. Can't you just feel that? Yeah. Again, I'm being over the top and maybe overwhelmed by what I'm looking at, but really amazing stuff. How he has a roundness and a life to what he is doing. And again, I don't know if I've said it already. He's really good at making ugly characters. he he makes some real mutants in here that that kind of blows me away. And I guess I'll have a brief comment about the content. Man, I don't want it to sound like a backhanded compliment because it's this weird thing. Like maybe think about it like where you think about things like free speech, and that this is absolutely a part of it. So a little bit a part of what goes on with the outlaw comics is they're wanting to make something on the very fringe, but guess what? It's still free speech, and because, and I hate to put it this way, it's not necessarily stuff I agree with here, but I agree with free speech. And this guy, uh, both Ed Piskor and Jim Rugg, have made a difference in my life. And so I'm putting aside maybe the things that I don't like because they've made it, they've broadened my horizons. So maybe a good way to put it is the things that they're pushing free speech rights, creator rights with that stuff. And I'm standing behind that. I'm standing behind the fact that they've both made my life better. And even though the content isn't necessarily my favorite thing, or at least the gore part isn't my favorite thing, it's still it's still there's still stuff to be learned from. It's still pretty amazing work, and listen, it's free speech. That's I'm gonna stand behind that every time. And on top of, again, these guys making a difference in my life and broadening my horizons. So I'll stand behind that because of the impact they've made on my life. So I guess that's maybe a little bit of it. Now, if you want to look at this again another way, how do you learn from what these guys are doing and what he's doing specifically here? This is all kind of this sepia thing. He does this a lot. This clever deal where the word balloons are perfectly white and then everything's kind of seeped out a little bit. Now, the thing again, back to his textures that are so amazing. He This is all one color, but he's done such a good job of varying textures, varying light and dark, that it almost has the same characteristics as a color comic. Really amazing stuff. And again, I love his use of lights and darks. And if you're looking at a way to, if you're a Zipatone guy, which is what I am, and if I'm sure on some of the computer programs that you run for digital art, you can copy in a sterile, kind of lifeless way a little bit, the duo shade effect. Um, it's still a good master. This is a master class on varying textures. So if you're wanting to do that kind of stuff, I would pick it up. Um, you're gonna get a roller coaster ride because reading these books makes you feel a very specific way. But I don't know if I've talked about it yet, but his stories are really well done. I can go into a little bit more depth if I haven't yacked about it already. But his stories are really well done. Despite how grotesque everything is in here, they're relatable stories. And I guess I'll kind of end on talking about his storytelling here. So this is the thing about the comic that I kind of get a kick out of. So in the first story, I believe the first comic. So you have this story here. This father and daughter are at a funeral because they've lost their mother. And there's a scene here which is pretty amazing to me where they're there and you have all these well wishers and they're just giving you BS. They're just saying these wordless nice things because they want to tell you that they care but they don't know how, or they just don't know how to express themselves in the face of your grief. And that's here. So those three panels here, the daughter, she's sad in the first one, apprehensive in the second one, and then crappy in the third one. And yeah, doing that kind of stuff for a living. I used to do funerals, and it runs the gamut. And so again, going back to this idea of this grotesque nature of what's going on, well, there's plenty to be had here for stories. So yeah, from top to bottom, it's a really good masterclass on varying your lights and darks. There, and again, I know there's a lot of fans of like the '80s splatter punk VHS gore, which was also part of what he wanted to do. He wanted to do that in comic book form. But yeah, there's a lot to be seen here. Good story, pretty good, good art, um, good use of textures, a roundness to the characters that you can feel, and again, just a tooth, a very real tooth to everything that he does. So until next time, learn to vary your lights and darks. Boop.